Rick and Morty is one of many stories that revolves around infinite worlds and possibilities. As a result, it's far easier to come up with a fan theory that sounds plausible for the show. Today, we're going to be looking at our favorite Rick and Morty fan theories. It's time to see which ones are most believable. Hold on now, before we get started, subscribe to us. You'll be joining the notification squad and get frequent updates on new content.
Ooh, okay!
And one more thing, why not take part in our emoji quiz? Can you guess which film these emoji are showing? Wait to the end to find out.
I'm gonna need you to take these seeds into the bathroom, and I'm gonna need you to put them way up inside your butthole, Morty.
In my butt?
Put them way up inside there, as far as they can fit.
Oh, jeez, Rick. I really don't want to have to do that.
Rick is smart because of tree seeds. The very first episode of Rick and Morty is kind of weird. For one, Rick acts very differently here to the rest of the show, being far more exaggerated and far less grounded. Not only that, but he takes a particular interest in the mega trees and mega seeds of a far-off world.
So what's so special about these seeds anyways?
You ask a lot of questions, Morty. Not very charismatic.
These seeds from these trees will make you smarter, and Rick claims that they're important for his research and that he's used them before. When Morty used the seeds, he became super intelligent for a short span of time.
Square root of pi, Morty, go!
1.77245385. Whoa!
Unfortunately for Morty, however, the seeds also made him drool at the mouth when they wore off. Rick has been drooling at the mouth for quite some time now, and seems to be a lot smarter than even the Ricks from other realities. Could it be possible that the reason Rick is so smart and so drooly is that he found the seeds before any other Rick did? Rick often claims that he's the Rickest Rick, but it's entirely possible that this is because of his use of the mega seeds, and not out of being inherently better than any of his counterparts. It's not like this Rick isn't known to cheat.
You wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me. Yeah, murmur it up, D-bags.
Evil Rick and Morty's body switch. In the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, Rick gets taken and put on trial by a group of alternate Ricks for his crimes against Ricks. Now, before the name Rick loses all meaning, we should probably establish that there's one almighty dumb Rick, and there's also one megalomaniacal evil genius Morty. If that sounds a little out of character, that's because it is. This has caused some fans on Reddit to theorize that at some point a Rick and Morty from two dimensions swapped brains. Perhaps the evil Morty was actually the evilest Rick ever born and swapped brains with his Morty in order to get away with his master plan. It could also be assumed that the dumb Rick is simply at the council meetings in order to spy on the other Ricks. To keep in the loop, the dumb Rick's more disgusting behavior could be explained as something that evil Rick programmed into his Morty as a crude joke.
Oh, gosh, I hope not. I wouldn't want to offend you in any way.
If the fan theory is to be believed, then we could have something pretty interesting on our hands. So far, Rick and Morty hasn't really picked up any pre-existing plot threads, and has strayed away from a serialized format, so we have no idea if this will ever come up again. But we know that there is still an evil Morty out there, plotting and planning.
Here we are, Cronenberg Morty. A reality where everyone in the world got genetically Cronenberged. We'll fit right in, Cronenberg Morty. It'll be like we never even left Cronenberg world.
The original Rick is dead. It's well known in the show that Rick completely disappeared from Beth's life for decades. His disappearance caused Beth a lot of grief, and is a large part of the reason for her behavior today. She feels insecure and abandoned and constantly fears her dad will leave her life again. This raises the question, is it possible that the Rick we see in the show isn't Morty's original grandfather? We know that Rick and Morty currently live in a parallel universe, identical to the one the show started in, the only difference being the lack of Cronenberg monsters, meaning both Beths have lived the same life. It's possible that our Rick doesn't originally come from either universe, and that Morty's original Rick is long dead. Some fans have theorized that this Rick comes from a different universe, where his family have died.
That's horrible!
Yeah.
This would explain his several major issues like drink, depression, and the bizarre way he treats all of them.
What people call love is just a chemical reaction that compels animals to breed. It hits hard, Morty, then it slowly fades.
It would also explain why there was such a big gap between him leaving and him coming back into Beth's life. While Rick can travel through dimensions, he doesn't travel in time. So if Beth's Rick died when she was young, and Rick's family died quite recently, it would appear like Rick had just upped and left and then came back.
I really appreciate you, Morty.
Okay, cool. All right, Rick.
You little son of a... Are you a simulation? Huh? Are you a simulation?
No!
Rick and Jerry are still in a simulation. In an episode heavily inspired by The Matrix, Rick and Jerry are put into a simulation by a gang of con artist aliens who want the recipe for concentrated dark matter, something that only Rick has. The simulation is pretty sophisticated, even presenting Morty in a way realistic enough to make it seem like he's in there with Rick. When Rick and Jerry think they've escaped the simulation, it's revealed that they are in fact still inside it. The first hint comes from the fact that Jerry is still in his tuxedo, despite it not being his first outfit that day. When the simulation finally stops, he's in his underwear. However, some fans have looked at one particular scene from the episode and think it means that the cast could still very well be in the simulation. This episode is the first time a Plutonian is seen in the show. Plutonians are the residents of the dwarf planet Pluto, and some fans are now convinced that they only exist in the simulation. While there isn't a lot of evidence to support this theory, it's one that the episode itself plays about with at the end. Rick goes into Morty's room and drunkenly threatens him with a knife, as he himself is unsure if he's still in the simulation or not, which is something you'd never know.
Jeez.
You're good. You're a good kid.
Oh my god. What the hell?
Rick has figured out he's on a TV show. One fan theory with a lot of weight to support it is that Rick is simply so smart that he's now figured out that he's in a TV show. Rick is the only character to break the fourth wall. He has his own catchphrase.
Wubba lubba dub dub!
He shouts, "See you next week" to the audience and even announces the end of season 1. Breaking the fourth wall in animated sitcoms isn't unusual. South Park and Family Guy do it all the time. But Rick and Morty is different. Rather than being a show that plays with the fourth wall a lot, it's something that only Rick does. Every other character behaves how any TV show character would. Rick also owns a picture of a man who looks strikingly like Dan Harmon, one of the lead writers of the show. If Rick has realized he's on a TV show, that would certainly do a lot to explain his nihilistic behavior and personality.
You want to help me out here and kill some people? It's fun! We're totally justified because we're saving a little girl. I mean, we're both free and clear to murder these people.
Not only that, but he seems to have a particular interest in one of the show's creators. If he knows he's in a TV show, he may view life as even more meaningless, as he only exists to entertain an audience. That's a scary thought, and the idea that we only exist to serve others' benefit has been played around with in the show before.
Well, you should select a different timeline. I mean, if your father and I achieved our dreams, there's a chance you weren't even born. That came out wrong. That came out very wrong.
Rick left so that Summer would be born. It's established that near every alternate universe has a Rick and Morty. However, not every universe seems to have a Summer. The reason for this is that Summer was an unplanned teenage pregnancy. This has led some fans to think that it's possible that Rick intentionally abandoned his family so that Beth would rebel and accidentally conceive Summer.
Ooh, boy. Looks like you guys have been checking out alternate lives and realizing you don't have it as good, huh?
This could be because he knows that Summer is an effective jammer to help him travel through worlds undetected, or maybe just because he knows she'll bring her parents joy. There is a problem with this theory, however, and that is, while Rick travels across many worlds, he doesn't actually travel in time. This means that it's a real stretch that Rick would even know about Summer's potential existence. While he does have a box of time travel stuff, he's literally shelved it. Although, if the show does implement time travel later in the series, it's entirely possible that this theory could become true, as even though it's not currently accurate for Rick's timeline, it doesn't mean that he couldn't come to this conclusion once he finally cracks time travel. If this winds up being true, then we will have an almighty headache on our hands.
Look out for that homeless guy!
Open the door! Open the door! Open the door!
There isn't time! Just run!
The Jerriest Jerry. In close Rick counters of the Rick kind, we're introduced to the idea that the Rick and Morty of the show are the Rickest Rick and Mortiest Morty, which means that they are essentially the best versions of Rick and Morty out there. So who's the Jerriest Jerry? Well, fans have theorized that the Jerry living in the Cronenberg world is actually the best version of Jerry around. Jerry is usually weak and spineless, often overwhelmed by the pressures of the modern world. Whenever we see Cronenberg Jerry, however, he's settled right into his role as a tough, protective father and husband.
Nobody's killing me until after I catch my wife with another man.
We see this when he first starts beating down Cronenbergs, and we see it again when Summer and Morty revisit the world that Morty originally came from. While it certainly wasn't intentional, putting Jerry in this post-apocalyptic nightmare world seems to be exactly what he needed to come out of his shell and become the husband he was always supposed to be. Not only that, but without the stress of Rick and Morty, it seems that Beth and Jerry are finally able to settle down and have a happy marriage. While it's pretty awful that it requires two family members to go missing, it seems to have done wonders for Morty's parents. Jumping universe. A lot of these fan theories revolve around the nature of Rick and Morty's multiverse. However, this is the theory that probably relies on it the most. Some fans have postulated that we haven't followed the same Rick and Morty each episode, and that we may even be switching realities mid-episode without realizing. The episode Morty Night Run is one story that adds a lot of weight to the idea that we don't follow the same Rick and Morty each episode. It's been established that the Rick and Morty that the audience is most accustomed to is from universe C137. Yet, for some reason in Morty Night Run, when Jerry is dropped off at an all-Jerry daycare, his number reads 5126.
Hey, wait, do you have 5126? I'm not sure. Morty. That's a Blips and Chits ticket.
What?
Way to go, Morty. Whatever.
Wait, what?
The episode Total Rick Call also supports this theory. This episode introduces a character with the oh-so-adult name, Mr. Poopybutthole.
Ooh-wee! Whatever you want, Rick. We're here to help.
The episode also has a new intro that adds him into nearly every clip. When it's revealed that Mr. Poopybutthole is in fact a real person and not part of the villain's scheme, it means that this episode simply has to take place in another universe.
Ooh-wee! Amen to that. Now this little poopy pants is hungry. Will somebody pass me a pork chop?
Usually, jokes like this would be just that, jokes. But Rick and Morty's multiverse, combined with Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland's love of pranking the audience, means it's entirely possible that we haven't been following the same Rick and Morty each episode.
Excuse me, sir. Is your Morty insured? You know, every year hundreds of Mortys are injured. Back off!
Morty is not Rick's first. We spoke earlier about how Rick may not be the Smith family's first granddad. However, we want to talk a bit more about the idea that Morty isn't Rick's first. Rick seems to have memories of a baby Morty, which doesn't seem possible if Rick has disappeared for some 20 years. In fact, there's even a photograph of the two of them together. We already know that Rick has jumped to different universes just to try again before, and he does so with seemingly very little care. It would make sense given the very strange way that Rick behaves towards his grandson. He simultaneously seems to both love and hate him. When you consider the idea that he's already lost his grandson once, this behavior would make sense. Rick needs a Morty, but at the same time, the idea of him getting attached to one could be driving him to behave in such an abusive way to the boy.
I don't know what you mean by that. Can you be a little bit more specific?
At the start of the show, it seemed as though Grandpa Rick hasn't been back in the Smith family's life for very long, just long enough to get on Jerry's nerves. It could be that he has only recently come to this universe, where Rick is already dead and is looking for a new home. Sharing a universe with Gravity Falls. Here's the big one. We all know that Rick and Morty creator Justin Roiland is good friends with Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch. As a result, the two shows have a few references to each other. It also seems quite likely that despite what the creators say, the two shows do indeed share the same universe. Gravity Falls frequently suggests that Ford travels to different universes, and it's not a huge stretch to imagine that he's met Rick, the only other universe jumper around. In the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, Rick opens up multiple portals to other dimensionals. One portal has a pen and notepad, along with a question mark with a mug coming out of it. This may seem like nothing, but in the Gravity Falls episode Society of the Blind Eye, Grunkle Stan loses those exact items from his desk via a universe portal. Could it be that the two shows do indeed share a universe? The creators deny it, but the references are pretty strong. At the very least, we can assume that Gravity Falls may be canon to Rick and Morty, but not vice versa. Although with Gravity Falls finally over, it seems unlikely we'll get any more information on this unless the characters appear in an episode of Rick and Morty for a one-off crossover. That's all we've got time for today. Was there anything that we missed that you wish we'd included? Also, thanks to Reddit for all these awesome fan theories. Comment below and let us know your favorite Rick and Morty fan theories. Before we go, one last thing. If you played our emoji quiz today and answered, then you were right. Remember to subscribe to get more videos from our playlist. And as always, thanks for watching.
Boy, what a waste of time.